Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spiritual Journey podcast. My name is Nimesh Radia, and I'm your host. I always love starting the podcast by saying thank you. I feel so very blessed with the podcast, the number of people it gets to, the message I receive on a weekly basis. My objective when I started was to simplify spirituality and to guide people on their journey. And I love receiving those messages where I know it's getting received by the person when they need it most. So thank you for those messages. I am an Akashic record reader, Akashic trainer, podcast host, podcast creator, as well as a spiritual coach and mentor. I love what I get to do. I get to guide people to truly be their authentic selves. I feel like we're all being pushed differently at the moment in terms of the universe, and I feel like we're all going through some kind of rebirth, some kind of reset, and I love to guide people to kind of go through that. With this podcast, I also get to interview some amazing, beautiful guests. And today I'm joined by the amazing Lisa Turner. Lisa, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you. It's so great to be here. So I'm Lisa Turner. I'm an award-winning coach. I mentor conscious leaders and visionary thinkers to assist them to remove any inner resistance so that they can become the transcendent leaders that the world and we're all crying out for. I've worked with everyone from politicians to other spiritual coaches and mentors and healers. Some people the kind of people you have to sign an NDA before I can work with. So, and just, I should never say just, and fabulous regular people who may not be famous, but have their beautiful, small, huge role to play in what I call this conscious, you talked about this rebirth. I call it the conscious tipping point.
I love it. I love it. And I'll always say that whatever role we have to play on this planet, everybody is just as important as everybody else. Doesn't matter what your title is, doesn't matter we're all part of one vibration, one energy, again, it's what I believe. So everybody has a role to play though, right? It's kind of interesting when you look at it where, we're all, if you believe in, we're all part of one vibration, but then, well, hold on, where does the individual part come? And that's where I feel that our soul journey is maybe a small part of the whole consciousness, but it's just as important as everyone else's soul journey.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there, because I often think like this idea of souls and small parts, I often think our soul is infinite, it's like, and yes, sometimes we're in a finite body having what seems like a finite life, but our soul is infinite. And one of the things, yeah, so one of the things I often talk about is this, you're saying about we all have our important part. I think of it like it only takes one tiny little candle to step into a dark room, and the whole room you can see. I mean, maybe not really clearly, but you can see. And, we're all that candle.
Yeah, no, I love it. And it's like a pebble in the sea, same thing, pebble in a lake, right? You just a little pebble creates that ripple effect.
Absolutely.
And it's even with the work that I do, the work that we do, is that I know I get to touch many people. So if I'm mentoring one person, I know that person I'm going to change and make a difference to them, and they're then going to make a big difference to people around them. And then that's how the ripple effect comes in. So I love what we get to do. I love, we all have the individual roles to play. I'm also, anyone that's assigned to me, anyone that's meant to work with will find me. I truly believe that. So the current energy for me it's really shifting. Like I said, it's shifting from my perspective, divine masculine to divine feminine. I feel like a lot of people are going through crisis because the masculine in them is going through some sort of identity crisis, and the feminine in them, which is the gifts, the heart, is kind of finding his power, finding his peace. But I'm just curious, what are you finding with your clients? Well, what's your take on the current energy? What are you seeing in the world?
Yeah, what I am noticing, I'm just feeling into who have I been speaking to recently. So what I'm noticing is a sense of people feeling a little bit lost, a bit disconnected from who they truly are. I think what's also happening, and although it seems it is uncomfortable, but it's actually good, which is all of the collective trauma that us as a species have inflicted on each other and ourselves is kind of coming to the surface, which is like on the one side, it's, it's incredibly painful and uncomfortable, but it's coming up so that we can resolve it and clear it. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm also seeing a lot of people who would maybe a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, would never have considered themselves to be any form of a change maker or a visionary leader, are kind of saying, you know what, I really want to make a difference. I really want to make a difference, and figuring out what that is for them. So that's what I'm noticing.
I love it. I love it. And it just, and people are kind of not knowing who they are. For me, is like the rebirth I was talking about, right? It's that we're going through some kind of reset where everything we knew about ourselves isn't valid anymore. And um, I do feel like the walls around us are going to start breaking down, and we have a choice of focusing on ourselves and doing the healing, or letting the outside world consume us, right? It is just, it's an interesting time where I feel like we all have a role to play to be that light worker. I mean, I recorded an episode called The Spiritual Bridge. I feel like our light is meant to shine to guide people.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I call these, I tend not to use the word light worker because it often has, it's come, I think it sometimes comes with a lot of baggage, that word. And I often use the word a transcendent or a transcendent leader, which
Mm.
is the idea. And like, I've not got nothing against the word light worker. I just find that people come with a preconceived idea of what it is. Whereas, and it can mean almost anything, like working with the light. Well, that could mean almost anything. So a transcendent, is just a term I use, which is somebody who can transcend, which means they can rise above what they currently see. And I think that's what for some really resonates, because they're moving, like, this is part of us moving to a high level of consciousness. And so a transcendent is someone who lives their life as a work of art. They have no expectation of being perfect. They have no expectation of necessarily even doing anything on any particular day, but every single day has the opportunity for growth, even if that growth is under the duvet having a 4-hour cry.
I love it. Love it. And I mean, having a duvet day is a good thing too. Crying is actually very spiritual. But it's always interesting for me how we kind of get hung up on words. And for me, it's a human thing, right? It's that whatever vibration we put on something is the vibration we put on it, right? So whether you call it a light worker, whether you call it transcendence, whether you call it, ascension, shifting from the third dimension to the fifth dimension, being the spiritual bridge, for me, it's all words. For me, it's always about the intention. What's your intention? If your intention is to raise your vibration, raise your energy, do the work that you need to for you to then magnify your light so that you can be that guide for others. That's, for me, is what's important. You can call it whatever you resonate with. It's just, whether it's a light worker, whatever's in your heart, and there's no right or wrong. It's like, I mean, I read Akashic records, and I'm very protective over them, but I also know that's a human term. It's a human term. Then sometimes we love to give definitions, and I kind of feel like the time and the age we're moving into, it's all new. So all these definitions and everything we put on these words and the emotion that we have attached to it, I feel like it's all going to resolve. I feel like it's all shifting, and it's the more that we can be present in this moment and appreciate the beauty, the joy in this moment, I feel like the simpler life will get. So how do you guide people to to transcend, as you called it? What's so if we have some listeners who are listening and just maybe going through something difficult, kind of struggling for their identity, how would you guide them through it? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so it would very much depend on where the person's at, and of course everything is always individual. We use a range of tools and modalities. I developed a modality which I call conscious emotional transformation, and it does pretty much what it says on the tin. It consciously transforms our experience of emotions. Excuse me. And the reason and I call it set, and it's really interesting you talk about the reset, because that's actually what we call the process, is like going through a reset.
Yes.
So So what SET does is it finds the cause of the pain, the emotional pain, without the client having to relive the experience that created it. It then the way we think about it is like this. It's really kind of a turning your thinking on its head. Because and to explain this might help if I gave you a little bit about my background. So super quick, I was actually I was groomed by my music teacher from the age of 12, trafficked as a child, moved to the UK and kept as a house prisoner for 5 years by I found out years later, it was actually a whole ring. There's a whole pedophile ring that was operating out of the school. And I've actually been working with some of the other people who have been through that experience. And this led me, having, eventually managed to escape, had PTSD, and tried all sorts of modalities. And some worked a bit, some didn't work at all, some made it worse. So what I did was, because I'm also an engineer and a scientist, but I have my title is doctor because I have a real proper PhD, didn't buy it off the internet, and it's in aeroacoustics and mathematical modeling, which is hard sums about noisy fans, is the way I think about it. So it's an easy way to explain it, I think. People get really, aeroacoustics, what could that mean? Noisy fans, just think noisy fans. So what I did was I looked at the whole emotional recovery process from a very from an outside perspective. I hadn't come to this from psychology or psychotherapy or any healing modality. It's just like, okay, so what is the situation? What do I want? What is really going on here? And I observed the way most people looked and thought about emotions. They thought about it in a way that I didn't know was necessarily helpful. And they often think about like negative emotions are something you have that you have to get rid of. And it's like, okay, and they're always bad, and we should always just focus on the positive. And I kind of like, that didn't resonate with me, and frankly, it didn't work. And I ended up, it's like, yeah, I could focus on the positive for a while, and then the trauma would come back. And it was like I was doing this loop, and then I was giving myself a hard time about not being positive enough. It's like, God damn it, be more positive. It's like, well, that's not helpful. And I actually get a lot of people come to me saying, I'm so glad you talk about it like this, because I've been giving myself a hard time for not being positive enough. And it's like, yeah, just like every emotion has a purpose. So rather than thinking about emotions as a problem, and there's good emotions that we should have and bad emotions we should avoid. It's like, well, what are emotions anyway? So what they are is guidance. And there's the ideal. The ideal is that we have some experience and that we feel some kind of emotional response as a result of that experience. And that tells us we're either moving towards what we want or away from what we want, or we're moving towards what we don't want or away from what we don't want. And depending on which direction we're going towards, something we want or something we don't want, we'll feel good or we'll feel bad. Either way, it's useful. Like if you are going the wrong direction on the motorway, no amount of skill is going to turn you around. And somebody really needs to go, you probably want to turn around, hang a Yui, as we say in Australia, hang a Yui and go around. Like that's not being negative. That's just saying, this is what we've got. This is what's happening. Let's change that. So the ideal response would be, you have an experience, you feel a feeling, you understand what that means, the meaning of that feeling, and then you either take some action or stop taking some action. And that's what I call the emotional response cycle. But here's what happens. We have an experience that we can't put appropriate meaning onto. So for example, any kind of traumatic experience is often, it's often not even the event itself. It's the meaning we put to it. And if you just go, well, that person did a bad thing, I didn't like that experience, so I'm just going to spend time with that person. Like that would have been a way better result, I guess. But, what happens is we have an experience, we put some meaning to it, and we often make it mean something about ourselves. I'm a bad person, I deserve to be punished, or whatever. And then as a result of that, we carry that meaning with us going forward. And then anytime we're in a situation where we have a similar trigger experience, that fires off that emotional response cycle, which goes, trigger experience means I'm a bad person, feel even worse, stop doing anything, and then you get into this negative spiral. So what I did was I looked at this process from, okay, so emotions are just information, but that information gets inappropriately coded. So there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with the universe. Let's just reprogram or recode that information. And what conscious emotional transformation does is we bring the emotion, not the experience, into awareness somatically, just long enough for us to rewire the nervous system. So we repair where there's resistance in the nervous system. And then that emotion just flows through the nervous system. So it no longer feels like a problem. So, because what a lot of like the way a lot of emotional kind of healing modalities work is they work on the idea that there's something you need to get rid of, or there's something you need to get. And I work on the idea of you have everything you need, it's just in the wrong place. So if you think about, like, we're an infinite being with an infinite capacity to experience love. Love energy should flow freely and infinitely throughout our entire being. What happens is we get what I call it, a traumatic response installed. So love tries to flow, comes along, and it hits this resistance. Then it goes then there's too much on one side and there's too little on the other. That makes sense?
Yeah.
And so what we do is we feel that difference, and we feel it as a discomfort, as pain, as emotional pain. Now, what a lot of modalities will do is try and avoid it, to stay positive. We know that doesn't work. Or they'll try and and there's a lot of energy modalities that will try and raise the emotion on the low side and tap it off on the high side, so we're in balance. That works up to a point, but the resistance is still there. So what SET does is finds the resistance, removes it, repairs that nervous system, and then we flood it with high vibrational energy. And then the little, like I say, like the cherry icing on top at the end is we even create new neural connections with a process called neuroplasticity. There's a system, there's a kind of an observed experience that is it's often called post-traumatic growth or post-transformational growth. So after a transformative experience, we have this window, and it's only about 2 to 6 hours, where the nervous system is wide open and flexible, almost like you were when you're a child. And in this time, you can reinstall or install new programming, new new neural pathways, so that the person is no, this goes beyond, oh, they had a problem and now it's gone, the fixed and now better, to they were they had a problem, now it's gone, but actually now they've even expanded. So that is essentially what I do with all of my clients in some form or other. We take them through this process.
Love it. I love it. And it's interesting, right? It's just, I remember when I first started in corporate, and I was very much positive mental attitude, PMA, have that. And, who decides what's a good emotion or a bad emotion? Who decides what's light and dark? It's just, there is no light without dark, and there's no dark without light. It's just, everything coexists, and, we're a soul having a human experience. So whatever that human experience is part of why we're here. And
Absolutely.
we push it down, and it's like, well, no, we're meant to experience it. Now, I always say that, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, right? So it's that sometimes we have that experience, and, we experience it, but then we stay there, right? And this is, so I love the way you describe the technique of, why do we need to go back to that? How is there a way of integrating the lesson that whole experience brings us without reliving it?
Yeah, I use this analogy. I love little metaphors and things. It's like, if you've got a stone in your shoe, what do you
Yeah.
need to do? You need to take the stone out of your shoe. Do you need to analyze the design of the shoe? Do you need to analyze where you were walking and what the weather was on that day when you got the stone in? Do you need to analyze, the surface that you were? No, you just take the stone out.
Keep it
Yeah.
simple, right? I always like the acronym KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just I actually think I really feel this spiritual journey is simple. We complicate it because we want to
Yeah.
focus.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting what you're saying about pain is, what do you say? Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. I think that's
Yeah,
how you phrase it. And
that's how
so I always think even pain has a purpose.
100%.
And I think I always say that there's three and a half types of pain. And the first pain is physical pain, which is pretty obvious. It's like you break your arm, it hurts. If you get sick, you feel like, and that's your body saying, sit still till we've healed. If you've got sick and you feel tired or whatever, it's because your immune system is working double hard to, fight whatever it is. So to sit still till we've healed. That's the purpose of that pain. Then we have emotional pain, and the two forms are emotional pain in the present, which is just guidance, emotional pain in the past, which we call trauma, and then I think there's a fourth pain, or a third, like the three and a half. So 4.43. So physical, two forms of emotional, like the three and a half, and then the third form of pain is spiritual pain. And it's difficult to distinguish spiritual pain from emotional pain. And this is where I see a lot of people, they get stuck in a loop of thinking they constantly need to be healed in some way. And they go from modality to modality. And actually, no, this is not emotional pain. What you are in right now is spiritual pain. And spiritual pain is the pain you feel when you have lost conscious awareness of your own higher self or source or the universe or whatever. And for whatever reason, you perceive yourself as disconnected from that. So that's my
Finding,
little take
yeah,
on pain.
it is interesting, right? And it's just because I'm a big believer that everything you need is inside you. So it's like if you're going through something, change your question, right? What are you learning? What are you experiencing? What are you expanding in that? Because it's like sometimes when people kind of learn modalities or get readings, and it's always, what's your intention? If your intention is to get insight and guidance in what's happening inside you, what's happening on your journey, then great, do it. If you're looking to be fixed, then that's where I would challenge you, because it's like, if you're experiencing pain, then until you integrate that lesson that comes with that pain, you're probably going to experience. And again, I don't really believe in repeat programs, because I believe that when we kind of repeat something we feel like we've done before, what we're doing is we're exposing a different level of healing that's required, or a different level of experience that comes with whatever that is. So I always recommend becoming a student. It's like something happens to you, become curious, become
Yeah.
yourself, and change the question: how is this expanding me? Because for a soul having human experience, then have the experience. Don't bypass it. Don't, if you're experiencing pain, don't push it down. You're meant to have that experience because you're a soul having that. And yes, I get it. It gets difficult, right? It's when you're experiencing something painful, and you go on a journey, and sometimes in denial, sometimes. But if you can sit with your pain, it's just super powerful. It's just, but don't let it consume you. And ask, how is it serving you? Because I really believe everything that happens to us serves us in some kind of way. And I know I
Yeah.
trigger people when I say that, because, wait, hold on. If I'm experiencing something super painful, how is it serving me? Why would my soul pick this experience?
Yeah, and I often even take it as like, I love that. I love that. And I think when we look at what's happening in the world right now, it's like there are a lot of people in pain trying to get out of pain. But actually, I wondered when you said, what is this like? How is this serving me? I also sometimes think that our pain serves the collective and the collective shift that we're happening. Maybe not immediately, maybe it's not actually the pain, but what we are being called to do and to become may be part of that serving the collective at a higher level. One of the models I have is this idea of I'm a great as an engineer, we love models. We'll build scale models, we'll build mathematical models. My PhD was a mathematical model, tensor calculus and n-dimensional space and all those fun things. And And I do love a bit of calculus, I have to say. And one of the things I've spotted is this kind of pattern in the chaos that's happening right now. Do you want to hear it? Do you want to hear
Go
what I'm
for it.
observing? Okay, so earlier I said, I think where we are is in this conscious tipping point. And when you look at back over the last about 100 years, there's this pattern of evolution that's been happening. And I call it Project Theos, or Project Theos, which is Project Source, which is also stands for the evolution of society and the species. So about 100 or so years ago, we had 2 world wars, a pandemic, and a depression. People didn't have enough food to eat. They didn't have anywhere to live. And they demanded and got better housing. Like, houses were built. We had mass-produced farming. Good or bad, that's what we got. People got fed. We got the National Health Service here in the UK, and different things happened in different other countries, but similarly, this kind of went across the world. This is the base chakra of our species being activated, or our society. Then in the 60s, we had sexual revolution, creativity, music, fashion, all that. Sacral chakra. The 80s, a financial boom, and it was all of everyone was, I want it now. I don't want to wait. Individual power, will, wealth, solar plexus chakra. Then in the 90s, our hearts were, we started with a birth of new age therapies and modalities, but with the death of Princess Diana, our hearts were cracked open. The heart chakra was activated. The internet in the early noughties, suddenly there were all these platforms that we could express ourselves. That's the throat chakra activating. And then with all those platforms came this next spiritual revolution where the third eye was activated in the late noughties. And we're now on the eve of the crown chakra being activated. Now, the other pattern that we have, which explains all this chaos, is just before the chakra above activates, the one below becomes excessive. So the 50s was a time of, you will obey the rules, you'll go to school, get a job, get married, have the kids, whatever. And people said, no, I want to have fun now. So it was kind of like that, burst out. In this, like towards the 70s, it all got a little bit creepy, a little bit weird. Everything got over sexualized. That's the over excess of the sacral. The 80s, people either got burnt or burnt out at the solar plexus. So that was the over expression. So everyone got a bit greedy, or not everyone, but there was a lot of greed about, and it burnt us all out. We're like, no, I want to feel my emotions. And that led to the heart opening. Now, what happened just before COVID and during COVID, and you probably spotted it as well, there was a lot of excessive spirituality, to the extent where it became toxic, to the extent where it's like, if you're not happy, there's something wrong with you. You got to be high vibe, or you're not spiritual enough. And, the whole I'm more spiritual than you. And, like there was a lot of guru talk, and, like there were a lot of incredibly beautiful spiritual principles that got morphed into something really quite ugly. For example, the principle of cause and effect. We're the creator of our universe. And, I'm the creator of this experience. And it's like, well, how did you, and like, then I was on a podcast once, and someone said, they kept asking me this question of like, so how did you create being abused as a child? And it's like, well, I can see now how I did, but I don't think we should go back and because she was asking it in a really weird way. She was saying, well, what were the red flags? And it's like, well, I think age 12, we're not going to see the red flags. And like the whole way grooming happens, I'm just like, but you must have known. And in the end, I said, well, maybe I was just stupid. I was 12. I didn't spot like the pattern of grooming that a whole entire pedophile ring that groomed over 250 other people. Like, I must have been the silly one. And it's like, you can never apply this retrospectively. Like, I can see how I created it, and it led me to create Set and have this whole life that I have.
Well, we
So
for this moment, right?
exactly. Yeah. So where we are now is on the eve of the crown. All of the chakras are in excess, and they kind of have to be, because the crown is going to need so much to activate. And that's why we have this. It's often called the meta crisis, which is this sort of collective interwoven issues that you can't solve on their own. It's like, we can't solve for the economy without ruining the environment. If we solve for the environment, then babies starve. As we, and it's like, oh God, what do we do? And it's like, the way to do it is we got to transcend. We've got to rise above it. And that's why I think many of us are being called to be the transcendents, who are the transcendent leaders doing whatever that role is. Now, might be a huge role. It might be just one tiny thing, but we all need to find our inner light so that we can transcend this current crazy moment of chaos.
It's crazy that we chose to be here as souls, right? It's a
Absolutely.
choice. It's a choice. It's a really interesting take on the chakras and how it kind of relates to the journey that we've been on in recent times, and it does feel like a reset. So I guess all the chakras will be reset and we'll probably go back to base at some point, right? So that's an interesting kind of way to describe the current energy. I want to kind of go back on also something else you said, because it's like, I do believe that everything we're going through is always a co-creation. When we go through something deep, we are going through it for ourselves, but also we're going through it for the collective. And it's just interesting. It's like, so many of the people I'm working with right now, I always ask them to check with themselves, because sometimes when we're feeling a bit disconnected, actually it's not us, it's because of the what we're feeling environment. So it's always good to check in with yourself and just wait, what I'm feeling, is it for me or is it for the environment? Because I also believe that some of us have contracted to help Gaia, to help Mother Earth when the planet's going through something, to hold space. And it's just, but I also believe that a lot of us have chosen to experience really deep things in this life because we are doing it for our own karma, our own ancestral karma, but we're also taking one for the team. So we're meant to go through something deep so that we can help the community by guiding them, not fixing them, right? It's like the lady the podcast interview you were talking about. She clearly had an agenda, right? There was an agenda there that she wanted to kind of put into a frame, and no right or wrong, right? It is what it is. But the time we're in right now, I feel like it's like you said, living in the past, I feel like is going to hold us back because
Yeah.
we're doing something that's never been created before. So this is where channeling, this is what I talked about, the way I do this podcast is we don't prepare anything, because if we prepared, that's going to come from our mind, that's going to come from our past. Whereas the area that we're in right now is like living in the present moment. The only control, I mean, just take a look at us last few years. How much control did we really have? I mean, who knew that COVID was going to come along? Who knew that we're all going to go on lockdown? Who knew that the crazy energy of this year, where so many, kind of karmic closures and so many cycles ending, and so much that we couldn't predict. But the only thing we can predict is how do we feel in this moment? And from that, if we can appreciate the magic of this moment, like this conversation, then maybe the next moment becomes even more magical. And that for me is the best advice I can give anybody, is just, and I get it's difficult, when the world around you is kind of falling all over the place, and there's somebody on some random podcast saying, well, just be present in the moment, feel the magic in the moment, really ask, how is this experience kind of helping my soul grow? Why would I pick this experience? Then it's hard to do that in the moment, but there is power in it.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions I find useful in this, at those moments, is, who am I being called to become? Who am I being called to become? Because, when I often think, like, when an experience feels too difficult, too challenging, too much, too painful, rather than thinking like, I got to change the experience, I got to find somewhere nice. It's like, okay, no, who am I being called to become, for whom this experience is every day? And, like, to use another analogy, like, I love working out, and I love exercising, and it's like, I don't lift super heavy weights, but I know people who do. And it's like, those people who want to bench press, like huge weights, like, I couldn't do that. But if somebody gave me that and said, this is your job, you've got, like, this is the situation, in order to, like, I would then I would think, okay, so what I'm being called to do is to learn to be strong enough to push this weight. Yeah, which might not happen in an instant.
Sure, but it's building a muscle, right?
Exactly, exactly. It's like, where I live here, it's incredibly hilly, and I do a lot of cycling. And my one of my personal trainers, he has this great expression. He says, "Pain is just weakness leaving the body."
Pain
And
is
if
just
we think about, emotional pain is just emotional weakness leaving the body. It's like when we're faced with a situation that seems so overwhelming, it's like, okay, what inner strength muscle do I need to develop now, so that this becomes manageable, or so that I can be who I'm being called to become in this moment. That's just my way of thinking about it.
yeah, no, it's like it is in this moment, right? It's that because how often, I mean, you talked about it, right? How much when we're going through an emotion, how often do we bring our old self into that emotion? It's all the programming, all the expectation, everything we've been through. And if I had to summarize this challenge that we're in right now, I feel all programming is being challenged. All versions of what we thought we were, this, whether it's religious, whether it's societal, whether it's parental, all these rules that we've been put around us, I feel are somehow all being shifted, and we're all being challenged to be different and change. Humans naturally don't like change. I mean, everybody says, "Oh my God, I love change." Not everybody, but some people. But yeah, most people love change if they can plan for it, if they know it's coming, if they can see what it looks like. This period for me is everyone can feel change coming. Everybody can feel in the stomach, right? Naturally, our bodies are natural ways to communicate, and everyone can feel that change. Everybody wants to understand it and put it in a box, and you're not meant to, right? You're meant to ride the wave, experience the moment, whatever words you want to use. And it's just, it's challenging for me. It's challenging who we are as humans, because again, we like things to stay the same, whether you really admit it or not. We like routines, right? There's a certain expectation. The sun comes up, sun goes down, that sort of. But what if everything we believed is being changed? What if our whole paradigm, our whole way of thinking, and the whole way of living is, I mean, just look at everything that's happening on the planet, right? All the wars, but also, the politics in the US, and, whether you talk about the everything that's happening with Diddy and all that sort of stuff. It's just, everything is just changing and everything is evolving. And it's just, if we try and hold on to our old version of ourselves, this is where I think we're really going to struggle. So how would you advise somebody to truly embrace this moment and newness of becoming different and not holding on to their old selves?
Yeah, yeah. I think, as you say, a lot of people, they say that, a lot of people say they want change, but when it comes down to it, it's like they want to manage the change. They, as you said, they want to know where they're going. So I think for me, it's about recognizing that the way we have been living on this planet is no longer going to serve any of us. And that's why, I mean, it hasn't served any of us for quite some time. And it's only, when we hit peak oil, a while back, which is why we're having to use, less and less desirable resources. We need to change our entire relationship with ourselves, the planet, and each other. And I think the way to start is to just ask yourself the question. And if we ask ourselves the question, like, what would what, I don't like the word utopia, because that sounds like it's just too, like, oh, everything's got to be positive and happy and fluffy all the time. It's like, well, what would an optimized world look like? So if we go for the optimized, where we have challenges, where we go, and I think, we're going to go from outer growth, because it's been about getting the Tesla and the house and the bigger car and the bigger house and the another car and another house, and it's like the external growth, to actually, what if we start to grow inside? What if we grow the way we think, what we know, our skills, our emotional resilience? What if that's what we're being called to do? So my advice often is to just ask yourself, what is it that no longer serves you that you can let go of? And what are you pretending not to know?
Ooh, what are you pretending not to know?
Mm,
It's interesting. I also find that right now, the things that we're holding on to, the universe is pushing us more and more to let go. And I feel like we're being nudged. And this is where the universe gives us gentle nudges, a little bit of nudges here and then a little bit of shoves, a little bit of kicks. And that's when if we don't listen, we get fallen over. So, what no longer serves, I feel like is a really powerful question right now because, the reality is we're holding on to the old version of ourselves because, we're proud of him or her. He's made us who we are today. And, be proud, but at the same time, let go because you can't live in the past, and it's just, it's interesting the way you describe, kind of the accepting the reality. The way I ask people is, what does it feel like to live a soul-centered life? And that doesn't mean that everything's going to be rosy because we're a soul having a human experience. We're meant to experience things. And, again, like I said earlier, who decides what's good or bad? It just is an experience, and a lot of us are old souls. And it means that a lot of the experiences don't feel new, and it's okay too, right? It's just, be kind to ourselves is what I recommend to people. So I'd love to know, as we're coming close to the end of this podcast, how, if people want to reach out, people want to work with you, what would that look like? What services do you offer? I'll obviously include your details in the show notes. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about what you do and how people can work with you.
yeah, so we have a whole range of programs, and we have our Sacred Wisdom Sanctuary, which is it's a monthly membership. You can join for the first month for free. We have our next program is the Ascension Pathway, or Clearing the Ascension Pathway, which is where we take people through a full reset, where you do a complete reset of your nervous system, an emotional, spiritual, psychological, mental reset, so that you're kind of upgraded for your next level. So that's the Ascension Pathway. And we also reconnect. And I say this with caution because you're always connected. We recreate the conscious connection to your higher self. You're always connected to your higher self. We just restore the conscious awareness of that. And then we have our super high level masterminds. But the best place to head over to, and I'll give you some pointers to things to look for. So the best place to go to is just head over to my website, which is cetfreedom.com. And there's a couple of things to look out for. We have I am the queen of a quiz. I love doing a quiz. And there's a couple of quizzes there. One is the What's Your Spiritual Vibration quiz. And that looks at, are you working at the level of the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, or the higher self? We have another quiz, and which you can get to from the website, but also if you go beyondegoawakening.com, beyondegoawakening.com. And that's the transcendent cycle of awakening. So rather than thinking of awakening as like a switch on or off, it's a cycle that we go round, becoming more and more conscious each time. And there are 7 stages in the cycle. And depending on where you are, you have joys and fun and benefits. You have some interesting challenges, and there are some things that can cause you to get stuck in a particular place. And then that when you take the quiz, you get a report that will point you to where you are and what challenges you might be experiencing, and most importantly, what you can do to move to the next stage and experience the joys of that. So that's a few things. The other thing we're in the process of putting together, it's not quite up yet, it might be at the time of when this is out, but we're actually giving away free copies of my latest book, which is Our Conscious Tipping Point. And if you go to ourconscioustippingpoint.com, there'll be you can just fill in some details, answer a few questions, and you'll get completely free a copy, ta-da, of my book there.
I love it. And obviously I'll include details of your website and stuff in the show notes, so you can definitely find it there. So yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. I always love to ask any guest that comes on as we're closing out to maybe leave some affirmations or to a journal prompt, because it's really good to have a conscious conversation, but it's even better to take some action after a conscious conversation. So anything anything that you see in your heart, anything you want to share from an affirmations or a journal prompt perspective, love to hear.
Yeah, I think we've actually already covered them, and there's two, but I'm going to remind everyone of them. So the first is journal on the question. Anytime you're faced with a challenge, journal on the question, what am I pretending not to know? Such that if I were to know or learn this, would have this problem completely disappear, would have me be able to rise above this challenge. So what am I pretending not to know? The next one might be, I'm just going to think about how to. So the other one we said was, who am I being called to become? Like, what am I being called to become? So just journal on that. And I want to leave everyone with a final one, which is, how can I think about this differently? Because one of my favorite things is to turn our thinking on its head. So if we take everything you think you know to be true, and you just temporarily, just for a moment, work on the assumption that that isn't a truth and that everything you know is actually the opposite. So we play the opposite game. So what if positive emotions are actually bad for us? Oh, well, hang on, maybe that does happen, because when you get, like, we all get the dopamine hit from all of the social media, and then we end up in this sort of dopamine junkie zoned out space. So maybe that is true at some point, at some point. So just as an example. So like, what is it that you could think, what are the some of the presuppositions or assumptions that you could turn on their head and think, well, what if they were true instead? And just play with that as an idea. Because even if you don't straight away get to something useful, you'll move into something interesting, which may or may not be useful.
I love it. I love it. It's like all the questions we ask, and changing our question for me increases our awareness. And without awareness, it's like we all talk about the spiritual journey, and for me, the first stage is always awareness. Because without awareness, what can you do? And it's like after awareness, it's always acceptance. So asking these questions helps you to become truly aware with what's going on inside you. And from that awareness, then you can start to do something different. Because without that, they say ignorance is bliss, but eventually it catches up, right? And it's just, becoming aware of what's happening inside you, having those honest conversations, and then accepting who you are. Because the next thing we do is we start to, oh my God, I wish I knew this 10 years ago. It's just, no, unless you've got a time machine, and I haven't. I've got one on order, but it hasn't arrived yet. What you can do is,
Who arrived yesterday?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I've loved having you on this podcast. Thank you for being here. Thank you for shining your light. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and I'll definitely include all your details in the show notes. And yeah, just I'm sure we'll be in touch soon. Sending everyone so much love and light. And Lisa, I'm going to hand over to you to close it out.
So my invitation as we close is to just call down from the universe, from your higher self, all of this light, and place all of this light into your hands, and recognize this is your light. And then what I'm going to invite you to do is to say whatever you want to say into that ball of light. It might be, I am a transcendent. I am love. The universe is love. And then we just throw that up into the universe and let it shower down on everyone. Thank you.
Powerful. Such a beautiful way to end. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank
Sending
you.
everyone so much love and light. Bye for now.